My mother said we're ashamed of you at Thanksgiving dinner, then laughed in front of everyone. I stood up and said something that made her burst into tears. She couldn't stop crying. My name is Cora. I'm 28 years old. Last Thanksgiving, my mother stood at the head of our dining room table. She raised her wine glass, her voice cutting through the warm air thick with turkey and tension. And then she said the words that shattered me completely. We're ashamed of you. The clatter of silverware froze in midair. Even the grandfather clock in the corner seemed to stop its steady ticking. I'd spent weeks convincing myself this Thanksgiving would finally heal our fractured family. The traditions, the golden autumn decorations, the smell of pumpkin pie, surely these could mend what felt irreparably broken between us. But in that single devastating moment, I knew I was wrong. And that wasn't even the cruelest part yet. Growing up in Millfield, Kentucky, I believed we were the picture-perfect American family. Church every Sunday morning, barbecue smoke drifting lazily through our backyard on summer evenings. Thanksgiving photos with coordinated outfits, our smiles frozen forever in polished frames that lined the mantelpiece. Dad worked 32 years at the Ford plant, steady and reliable. Mom stayed home, devoted herself to raising me and my younger brother Blake. Blake, the golden child. 2 years younger but somehow always shining brighter than I ever could. Academic scholarships, football trophies, the son they bragged about to every neighbor within earshot. Every mistake I made seemed to echo 10 times louder than his countless victories. He was their pride and joy. I was their constant worry, their disappointment, their problem child who never quite measured up to their impossibly high standards. I married Kevin when I was 22, hoping desperately that love would finally prove I was worthy, that I was enough. 6 years of hosting dinner parties in our spotless suburban home, playing the perfect wife role like my life depended on it. All of it was an elaborate mask, a carefully constructed facade. Behind those closed doors, silence grew heavier and more suffocating than the walls themselves. I discovered Kevin's late-night text messages with Rachel, his co-worker from the accounting firm. Secret conversations, stolen moments, lies wrapped in casual excuses. When I finally confronted him, trembling with hurt and fury, he called me paranoid, overly dramatic, impossibly needy. He refused marriage counseling, dismissed my pain, said I was exaggerating everything like I always did. I filed for divorce. Kevin fought me over every single possession, our savings account, the living room furniture, even our old coffee maker that barely worked. By the bitter end, I was financially drained, emotionally emptied, surviving on nothing but stubborn determination and fading hope. I moved into a tiny studio apartment above Murphy's Bakery on Main Street. 400 square feet of freedom. The rent was discounted in exchange for keeping their books balanced, managing their simple finances. Every morning, the scent of fresh cinnamon rolls and sourdough bread drifted upward, filling my small space with warmth and comfort. It smelled like new beginnings, like possibility. And most importantly, it was completely mine. My family's reaction to my divorce was ice-cold disappointment wrapped in false concern. No warm hugs, no gentle "Are you okay?" whispered with genuine care. Only probing questions that felt like accusations. What did you do wrong? Why couldn't you make it work? Why didn't you try harder to save your marriage? Meanwhile, Blake announced his engagement to Dr. Stephanie Walsh, the brilliant cardiac surgeon with the impeccable reputation. Her father was the chief of surgery at Louisville General, her mother chaired the hospital's charity board. Their family name carried weight, respect, social standing. Stephanie represented everything my parents had desperately wanted me to become: successful, polished, accomplished, admired. Still, I tried my absolute best. I wrapped thoughtful gifts with borrowed optimism and determined hope. A vintage leather tool set for Dad, discovered at an estate sale. A delicate crystal ornament for Mom, engraved with the year. A beautiful silver frame for Blake and Stephanie's engagement photos, their perfect smiles gleaming. And hidden deep inside, I carried my secret weapon: exciting news about a promotion at work, a substantial salary increase, a larger apartment across town. Real proof that I was finally rebuilding my shattered life from the ground up. I thought this Thanksgiving might bring redemption instead of the usual humiliation. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the year I'd finally measure up to their impossible expectations. But I had absolutely no idea how completely invisible I was about to become. The week before Thanksgiving, Mom called with her detailed guest list, her voice artificially cheerful but cutting like a razor. Every name she mentioned felt like a small wound. Aunt Dorothy, Uncle Frank, my cousin Nathan the successful real estate attorney, and of course, Dr. Walsh and his elegant wife Margaret. This wasn't going to be a cozy family holiday. It was a carefully orchestrated performance, a social showcase. I pressed my best navy dress until every wrinkle disappeared, wrapped my gifts with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Standing before my bathroom mirror, I practiced exactly how I'd announce my promotion news. Maybe this year, I whispered to my reflection, they'd finally see me as more than their greatest disappointment. The family farmhouse sparkled like something from a holiday magazine, garland wrapped perfectly around the wraparound porch, warm golden light spilling from every window. Blake opened the heavy oak door, looking polished and radiating the confidence that success brings. Stephanie appeared gracefully behind him, wearing a cream-colored cashmere dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, pearls gleaming around her slender neck. "Cora, you actually made it," Blake said with what sounded like warmth but felt oddly brief, almost dismissive. Stephanie smiled her practiced, perfect smile. "That shade of blue really complements your skin tone." It sounded genuinely surprised that anything could actually suit me, like she discovered something unexpectedly pleasant. Inside, conversation roared louder and more animated than the Christmas music playing softly in the background. Dad engaged in an intense debate about surgical procedures with Dr. Walsh, their voices booming with authority and expertise. Nathan leaned casually by the crackling fireplace, wine glass in hand, his posture radiating smugness and superiority. "So," he said, eyeing me with barely concealed amusement, "small-town life after city living must be quite the humbling experience." Every word felt like a cross-examination, like I was on trial for my life choices. Then Blake and Stephanie made their grand announcement that shifted the entire evening's focus. Their wedding plans were breathtaking: Tuscany, Italy, June 20th, a romantic villa overlooking rolling hills covered in vineyards. The dining room absolutely erupted with excitement and congratulations. Cell phones flashed as vineyard photos were passed around like precious trophies of their sophisticated taste. Mom clasped her hands together, her eyes sparkling with genuine joy. How incredibly exciting for all of us. The assumption in her words cut deep. Italy was never going to be within my limited budget, and she knew it perfectly well. I clapped politely anyway, smiled through increasingly stiff lips, and waited patiently for my moment. When the excited noise finally quieted to a manageable level, I seized my chance with desperate hope. "I've been offered a senior project coordinator position in Lexington," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady and confident. "It's significantly more responsibility, much better pay, a real step forward in my career." The response was devastating in its lukewarm politeness, a few distracted nods, a dismissive "that's nice, dear." Then the spotlight immediately swung right back to Tuscany, Italian vineyards, and wedding planning, as if I'd never spoken at all. At dinner, Nathan bragged extensively about defending major corporations from environmental lawsuits, his victories over frivolous claims. Uncle Frank nodded along like his son had personally saved American capitalism from destruction. Stephanie described her elaborate dress shopping expeditions to exclusive Chicago boutiques, each gown more expensive than my car. Mom sighed wistfully, as if she'd missed her own chance at such elegance and sophistication. I remembered my own rushed courthouse wedding, a simple dress from Target, no fanfare or celebration. The conversation shifted seamlessly to honeymoon destinations: Greece, private yachts, champagne served on crystal blue Mediterranean water. Each glamorous detail widened the growing gulf between their privileged world and my modest reality. When Aunt Dorothy politely asked about my new job again, I tried once more with fading enthusiasm. "The company's expanding rapidly. I'll be managing client accounts directly, building real relationships." "That's lovely, sweetheart," she replied in the tone reserved for consoling small children. Uncle Frank leaned closer, his expression serious and patronizing. "Stability matters most, Cora. New companies disappear overnight without warning." Dr. Walsh added with medical authority, "Innovation isn't always improvement. Sometimes the old ways work best." My excitement deflated completely, like a balloon slowly losing air. Then Nathan casually mentioned his house hunting adventures in an exclusive gated neighborhood, complete with a 3-car garage and access to the best private schools. The entire table leaned in, absolutely fascinated by square footage discussions and property values. My small apartment above Murphy's Bakery suddenly felt like a source of deep shame, a symbol of my failure to launch properly into adulthood. Blake attempted to help, but his words stung worse than silence. Cora's always been naturally great with people, he offered weakly. But it sounded exactly like pity disguised as praise, a participation ribbon for surviving rather than truly winning at life. The unspoken message couldn't have been clearer if they'd written it in bold letters across the dining room wall. My life simply wasn't good enough by their standards. I was the family disappointment, the cautionary tale, the one who couldn't get her act together. And when dessert finally arrived, so did the verdict that would completely break me apart. The heavenly smell of Mom's famous apple pie filled the air, competing with the elegant French pastries that Stephanie had brought from an upscale bakery downtown. Everything Stephanie touched was flawless, expensive, sophisticated. Forks clinked against fine china, wine glasses were refilled with expensive bottles, and the conversation took a philosophical turn that made my stomach clench with dread. Dr. Walsh leaned forward, his voice calm but sharp as his surgical instruments. By your late 20s, you should absolutely know your life's direction. Life consists of choices, and every choice carries consequences. Margaret Walsh nodded in perfect agreement, adding with cold certainty, commitment means never giving up, no matter how difficult things become. They weren't addressing the room generally. They were staring directly at me, their judgment unmistakable. Nathan joined the attack with courtroom confidence and smugness. In legal practice, problems disappear if you work hard enough and stay focused. Persistence always separates the winners from the quitters. Uncle Frank raised his wine glass in hearty agreement, his approval obvious and painful. Every single eye at that table turned toward me like spotlights. The unspoken verdict was crystal clear, heavy and suffocating. I whispered, my voice barely audible but determined, sometimes leaving a bad situation takes infinitely more courage than staying and suffering in silence. The table froze completely. Mom's jaw tightened into a hard line. Dad looked away, avoiding my eyes entirely. Blake cleared his throat desperately, scrambling to change the subject before things escalated further. Let's keep this positive, everyone. It's Thanksgiving after all. But Mom wasn't finished with me. Not even close. Her voice sliced across the room like a blade, cold and merciless. No, Blake. This conversation absolutely needs to happen right now. She stood slowly, deliberately, lifting her wine glass high. Her gaze swept across the table like a weapon, her eyes glistening in the flickering candlelight, not with unshed tears, but with pure, crystallized judgment. Then she spoke the words that would haunt me forever, steady and merciless and absolutely unforgettable, "We're ashamed of you." The words landed heavier than any legal judgment, any divorce decree, any failure I'd ever experienced. The entire room tilted sideways. My breath caught painfully in my chest, my body physically recoiled as if she'd struck me across the face. And then came the laughter. First nervous and uncomfortable, then bolder, sharper, crueler. Blake chuckled, then smirked, his voice turning cold and vicious. Maybe Mom's absolutely right. Maybe you needed to hear this harsh truth. Nathan shook his head, laughing softly like he'd just won a particularly satisfying case. Even Uncle Frank let out a short, approving chuckle that cut through my heart. Their obvious joy at my complete humiliation burned hotter than the fireplace crackling nearby. Mom pressed on, emboldened by their enthusiastic support. You're 28 years old, divorced, living like some college dropout who never grew up. Look at Blake. Look at Stephanie. Look at Nathan's success. And then look at yourself, Cora. Do you realize what an embarrassment this is for our entire family? I scanned the table frantically, desperately searching for one single sympathetic face, one person who might defend me. Dad cleared his throat roughly, muttered under his breath, "Your mother's absolutely right about this." Stephanie squeezed Blake's hand, her expression carefully neutral and politely distant. Not one person at that table defended me. Not a single soul. The old grandfather clock ticked loudly in the hallway, each second pounding like a hammer against my skull. For years, I'd swallowed every critique, carried every disappointed sigh like stones in my chest, absorbed their judgment until it became my own inner voice. But something fundamental shifted deep inside me. Not shame this time, pure, blazing fire. If they wanted brutal honesty, I would give them more truth than they could handle. The room fell silent as death, heavy as granite. I stood slowly, deliberately, and every smirk vanished from their faces like smoke. "You're ashamed of me?" My voice was steady, clear, unshakable. "Then listen very carefully. Let me show you what real shame actually looks like." I turned to Mom first, her lipstick still perfect, her eyes growing wide with sudden fear. Shame is a mother having a secret affair with her Pilates instructor. Did you think a 12-year-old wouldn't notice those late-night phone calls? Or wonder why instructor Jake suddenly moved to Arizona without any explanation? Her face drained of all color, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. I shifted to Dad, his hand gripping his wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. And shame is a father drinking himself unconscious every single night. Whiskey bottles hidden behind the Christmas decorations in the garage. Alcohol on your breath when you tucked me in, thinking I was too young to understand. His glass slipped, clinking against his plate. He said absolutely nothing. Then I faced Blake, my supposedly perfect golden brother. "Should I tell Stephanie about your sophomore year at college? About Emma Thompson, how you begged me to cover for your cheating? Or should I mention last month when you called me sobbing, saying you felt completely trapped, that this engagement felt like the biggest mistake of your entire life?" Stephanie's hands slipped away from his as if he'd burned her. Her eyes went sharp and dangerous. Blake's face turned ghostly pale, his lips moving soundlessly. I looked directly at our shocked guests, their polished faces rigid with horror. "You want to discuss shame? Real shame is sitting at someone's table while systematically tearing down their own child. It's applauding while a family publicly humiliates their own blood." Dr. Walsh straightened in his chair, Margaret clutching her designer purse like a shield. Even Nathan looked genuinely rattled, the smooth-talking lawyer suddenly without any arguments. My voice grew stronger, more powerful with every sentence. "I divorced a man who betrayed our marriage vows instead of living a comfortable lie. I chose painful honesty over beautiful appearances, difficult truth over easy convenience. And you dare call that shameful? I call that survival. I call that courage." The crystal chandelier light trembled across the silver and fine china. I picked up my coat, my purse, and most importantly, my dignity. I'd rather be the disappointment in this family than be another puppet in a performance built entirely on lies and pretense. The silence was absolutely complete. Mom's tears spilled down her cheeks, unchecked and unstoppable. Dad stared at his untouched plate. Blake trembled under Stephanie's furious, questioning glare. Their supposedly perfect family lay completely shattered before my eyes. At the front door, I paused, my voice calm but absolutely final. "You're ashamed of me? Perfect. I'm proud of that shame." And then I walked out into the cold November night, leaving them alone with the wreckage of their beautiful lies. But what happened after that devastating evening would change absolutely everything once again. The crisp air hit my face as I stepped outside, snowflakes beginning to fall and cling to my hair. The world felt strangely peaceful and quiet. Behind me, angry voices rose in chaos and confusion, but I kept walking steadily forward. For the first time in years, my steps felt completely free.